Now, before our next speaker, a quick reminder to our international live stream audience that we're running this event under Chatham House rules. This means you are free to use information from our conference sessions, but not allowed to reveal who made any specific comments without their prior permission. So, having now gained a greater understanding of what CSOs are thinking, let's drill down now into the types of security challenges facing supply chain operations, not least how to avoid high-risk transportation routes where cargo criminals are known to be most active. Once again, technology has a big part to play in helping to identify and analyse these risks. As everyone in our audience knows, the threat of cargo crime is ever present. Logistics operators must balance just-in-time delivery pressures against cost, driver hours and other operational constraints, whilst also implementing controls to ensure the security of drivers, trucks and cargoes. So, where is the best place for a security intervention from point of loading to the delivery destination? And what does it look like? What security measures provide the best bang for their buck? Using a case study route and real-life incidents, our next presentation will help to answer these questions. So, let's hand over to our next speakers, Steve Bacco and Jean Albin at Risk Intelligence, for their presentation recorded at the Risk Intelligence headquarters in Copenhagen.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for tuning into our presentation today. My name is Steve Bacco, the Land Risk Manager at Risk Intelligence.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeanne Albin. I am the Land Risk Security Specialist. Welcome.
So today we'll be discussing how to defeat cargo theft whilst acknowledging that there is not enough secure truck parking out there, and also, although highly recommended, you may not be able to certify your entire truck fleet to the TAPA TSR standard. So considering these constraints, we'll discuss what you can do to reduce your threat of cargo theft. So I'll discuss what options you have to reduce the likelihood and impact of a cargo theft incident against one of your trucks, and where different prevention, detection and response measures fit in within the logistics planning and delivery process.
Using two case study incidents, I will then discuss the connection between the criminal capabilities and intentions on the one hand, and truck and parking area vulnerabilities that provide opportunities for criminal to act on the other, to highlight what security measures can help you avoid falling victim to cargo theft.
So let's dive into the various risk management controls available to you. So in simple cause and effect terms, the direct risk we face, which is no surprise, is criminals trying to steal our cargo or fuel, and on occasion using or threatening violence against a driver. And the threat of insider collusion can also never be discounted. So ideally, we implement controls to prevent an incident before it happens. But if prevention fails, all we can do is try to reduce the impact through detection and response measures, whilst remembering that certain controls may be effective in preventing theft, but they'll not stop a robbery and they won't prevent insider collusion. So by looking at two typical cargo theft incidents, we can understand how best to apply these control measures. So our two incidents took place against trucks on the A4 motorway near Dresden, Germany. And we consider this route a hotspot for cargo and fuel theft, and have recorded 70 incidents along this route this year alone. And for our two case study incidents, these include the theft of 2 pallet loads of trainers and the theft of 250 car tyres. Both incidents took place at non-secure rest areas along the A4. Jean will be looking at the situation context and the criminal opportunities that these two parking areas provide shortly in the presentation. But when analysing how these two incidents played out, we'll consider what controls may have prevented or reduced the impact of the incident. And this includes a variety of physical and technical preventive controls, and also procedural and intelligence controls that, if implemented, may have prevented the incident. And there are no bad controls. It's just a case of selecting the right combination of controls for the right situation, which are both feasible and cost effective for your business. So when prevention failed in these two incidents we're looking at today, the selective physical control measures for the truck and trailer were defeated by the criminals, and other controls were not implemented. Basically, the truck was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now we're in damage containment. So technical, procedural and intelligent controls could still have alerted the operator of the theft in progress to possibly limit the impact of the incident. But when the detection measures fail to alert the operator and deter or stop the criminals, all that's left is response. And unfortunately, all too often, this involves the driver discovering the theft in the morning. However, there are still plenty of control measures that can be applied to respond to an incident and possibly recover the cargo. I'll now hand over to Jean so we can dig into these incidents, understand what happened, and what you can do to prevent falling victim to a similar incident.
So let's now look in more details at the data we have collected. Our goal here is to analyze the different steps of a typical cargo theft commission process, to connect the dots between the crime events and the situational context in which they occurred, to highlight the elements that may have influenced offenders' decision to target your vehicle or not, and ultimately to define the who, the how, and where and when to demonstrate how criminals utilize their skills and resources to exploit vulnerabilities in the highlighted hotspot. But first, I think it is important to take an instant to remember, when does cargo crime happen? And here our data is concordant with wider crime studies theories on highlighting two important points. The first one is that offenders are rational beings. Their action heavily depends on cost-benefits analysis throughout the whole crime commission process. At the end of the day, they aim to maximize their rewards and minimize the efforts and the risk associated with carrying out a crime. The second point is that crime then occurs when there is an opportunity for it. And typically, this opportunity will be created when there is a convergence of a motivated offender, a target that is deemed to be suitable, and the absence of capable guardians, that is, crime controllers such as security guards, police officers, passerbys, quite often in our situation other drivers, but also local business managers and workers, for example. And in practice, what we then see from our data sets is that offenders rarely target vehicles because of their load alone. That's cases of insider threats aside, obviously. Rather, they most often follow a three-step process that is based on finding opportunities to commit a theft. They will first identify vulnerable sites in which a large number of suitable targets may congregate. They will then go through a process of target selection and finally proceed with the crime event itself. But before we go any further, you may be asking yourselves, who exactly is offending? And here, whilst we do see a lot of common delinquents behind our recording incidents, in a lot of cases, we've seen small groups of offenders who were involved in a high number of crimes, which implied high capabilities and significant criminal knowledge, and they displayed high levels of confidence and motivation. This, in turn, implied the involvement of organized elements within the highlighted hotspot. This is crucial information because the presence of this type of threat actor heavily impacts the local threat levels, and in a negative way, obviously. Why? Well, because they tend to carry out, or at least be able to carry out, crimes that have much higher impact than other type of criminal enterprises. Now, if we look at the characteristics then of the incidents we are presenting today, in terms of site selection, here our data is very clear. One of the most important elements in cargo crime hotspots throughout Europe is, unsurprisingly, the lack of secure parking options. And this element is very much central to understanding the situation in the area we are concentrating on today. There are no parking that we here at Risk Intelligence assessed as being low risk out of 76 parking areas that we recorded on our system. And in fact, the majority of incidents that we see throughout this hotspot occurred in parking areas presenting similar characteristics to the two we are using as example today. First, they are isolated, as you can see from the satellite imagery on the screen right now. There is little to no activity surrounding the rest areas. The closest habitations are far away from the parking space itself, etc. We also note very poor visibility around the parking areas. They are often not visible for the roads or the motorways. They are typically badly lit. Outside of peak operating times, there is little to no traffic within or really close to these parking areas. They also present no or poor access control measures. typically no physical barriers such as fences and gates, and most of the time, as is the case with most rest areas, they are completely open. And these elements mean that offenders can, and indeed do, hide in plain sight with little to no effort. It also means that exiting the crime scene is incredibly easy. It is quite literally a matter of jumping in a vehicle and driving away if the crime has not been noticed by that point in the crime commission process. The second point is targets. So as far as targets are concerned, vehicles most likely to fall to victimizations are, well, simply put, the one that can be quickly and easily accessed. We see different MOs here, of course, but in the majority of our incidents, to be precise, 55% of our recorded cases, offenders simply cut through the trailer's curtains to gain access to the cargo area. What we then see is that, contrary to what a lot of people may believe, cargo crime is not necessarily focused on high-value goods. And in fact, through that particular hotspot, some of the most widely stolen commodities end up being food products, drinks, or clothes. And just from these 2 points, we can clearly see that the question of efforts is central to the crime commission process, as has been previously mentioned. But alongside concentrating on vulnerable sites and preferring to target vehicles deemed easy to access or easier to access, a third element we keep seeing is the fact that offenders overwhelmingly act at night. In fact, out of the 31 incidents in which a precise time could be established, we have recorded on our hotspot, a staggering 29 occurred at nighttime. Here, the main elements to comment on is obviously the lack of light, particularly when we are talking about areas where artificial lighting is poor to non-existent. The lack of light decreases the risk of being caught by witnesses. Drivers are typically asleep, and they are thus not in a position to act as capable guardians. Parking areas are likely to be less populated than during the daytime, etc. And all these elements mean that nighttime may be perceived by offenders as making the crime commission process easier. And as a result, it might be increasing the incentive to commit a crime in the first place. And whilst all of those information may appear to be kind of common sense, the fact that we see such high incidence of cargo theft throughout Europe indicate that we as an industry need to keep working on informing ourselves precisely on threat actors involved in cargo crime and on their processes. And as you can see, collecting and analyzing incident data gives us exactly that. It gives us a lot of information on the how, the who, and the when of cargo crime. And in return, these give us precious indications on how to prevent thefts from happening in the first place. There are many different steps that can be taken to avoid victimization when parking in a secure location is just simply not possible. And these include attempting to maximize potential guardianship, for example, or using a whole range of technological solutions to increase the effort required by offender to access your cargo. However, the choice of which behavioral, technological, or procedural approach may be most effective and also cost-effective for you can only be assessed after understanding the various threats you might be confronted with. And in this sense, we would argue that nothing is more essential than raising one's awareness through intelligence. Using intelligence will help you identify secure parking areas, of course, but it will also help you make informed decisions on the use of non-secured sites, depending on the local threat picture, on the incident history, and the site's vulnerabilities when you have to park in one of those places. Additionally, as you can see from the 2 hotspots that are currently presented on the screen, threat is situational. And here our data highlight that the main threats around Milan, for example, which is another one of Europe's major cargo theft hotspots, is located not on the way, as was the case with the hotspot we concentrated on today, but within industrial estates themselves, as criminal enterprises will often target vehicles that are parked in the premises of facilities rather than in dedicated parking or rest areas. And in fact, even if we stay within one country, you may have to adapt to different threats. Our incidents show that when operating at Frankfurt, for example, particularly along the A5, A6, and A7 motorways, the main threat you are likely to experience is not technically cargo theft, but fuel theft. And this implies that there is a different threat picture in the region that is but a few hundred kilometers away from the hotspot we have been showing today.
So to conclude today, the lack of secure parking, that's an environmental risk and you can't change that. And you'll most likely have to use non-secure parking on some of your routes. However, not securing your truck, that's an organisational risk that you can control. And even if you can't certify to TAPA TSR standard right now, implement the protocols to the extent possible to mitigate your risks, particularly when you're using non-secure parking. Use intelligence to understand the threat. And when using non-secure parking, your truck and trailer become the security perimeter. So you do really need to implement security controls, but of course, there will always be a cost factor involved for you. But without intelligence, you lack a baseline to help you decide which controls to implement to combat the threat and make best use of your resources. So please contact us, TAPA, or any of the other TAPA Premier partners or members for advice on implementing the range of controls that we discussed today. And finally, thanks for listening in, and thank you once again to the TAPA team for the opportunity to present today. And we wish you all a great virtual conference.
Thank you all, and see you in Amsterdam.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you to Steve and Jean for their fascinating insight. And if you have any questions for Risk Intelligence or any of the TAPA EMEA 2023 Premier Partners, then you can connect with them now via the exhibitor page of our conference website, where you'll find videos, profiles, contact details, and a request form for further information.